Sorry, I think the setting was wrong because the change of the computer, but hopefully the rest is still okay. It's been a great pleasure for me to listen to this morning's presentation. I learned a lot, both from the presentation and also from the recent studies on surrogacy. And my major concern is what to do about surrogacy. I have friends that are gay or lesbian wanting to make use of the technology, but I also have very feminist friends that feel very strongly against surrogacy. So I'm always torn between these different opinions. And looking into the studies, I see a lot of intended parents, and I feel sympathy for their desire to have children of their own. On the other hand, I also see more and more studies about surrogates in their experience. So, and I have the privilege to participate since 2006 in the debate in Taiwan surrogacy, because in 2006, actually with Yang-Ming together, National Taiwan University's Department of Sociology did a consensus conference on surrogacy. And in that conference, a consensus conference, we have 20 citizens from different backgrounds. And after, I think, 2 weekends or 3 weekends of debate, they decided that surrogacy should be legalized with some conditions. And so since then, the government had been contemplating how to legalize it, how to regulate it. But the whole progress stalemated because we have a requirement that any legislation to be delivered, to be submitted to the legislature, has to pass a gender equality assessment. And within that forum, I think there were some concerns still about surrogates being exploited. So my title, In Search of a Governing Framework, reflects my ambivalence on what to do with this situation. But I benefit a lot from the recent studies about surrogacy because of this so-called global assemblage. That is, as this morning, Professor Andreas Whittaker's study shows us how a global industry is emerging in a disruptive industry, and we see more people becoming parents with lower costs and faster processes. But on the other hand, this morning's Professor Rupapat's study in India's surrogate, I also see that the disparities in socioeconomic situation attract women that are mostly from lower socioeconomic situations, and they somehow they do make money. As this morning I asked Professor Whittaker, but I don't know whether I should feel comfortable about their situation. So whether it's an exploitation or not. And so today's so the issue that I'd like to think about or discuss with you is how can surrogacy be ethical? And I understand that yesterday, I think Professor Rupapat had a presentation which I sadly missed, so I don't know if my answer will be the same, but I would say that I argue that so far a lot of people have been emphasizing on whether we should ban commercial surrogacy or not. And I think maybe we've been focusing on the wrong issue. My argument is that we should focus on relationship rather than commercial or non-commercial or not. So let me elaborate and how can a governance framework facilitate an ethical surrogacy if possible at all? First of all, I'd like to begin from, I think pregnancy is not just a job. I understand that many people cannot understand, well, since women get pregnant all the time and some woman wants to make money, what's wrong with paying a woman for getting pregnant and then asking her to get the baby? I think the question has to look at the relationship. I think surrogacy, what's wrong with surrogacy is not because you're asking another woman to get pregnant for you. Because after all, we see a lot of abusive wives getting pregnant for husbands or the husband's family in order to pass on the heir in the family, and we don't see that as an exploitation, even though we know that the woman is unhappy. So I think what's wrong about or unethical about surrogacy is not getting pregnant for someone else, okay? And I also think that it's not about giving child away to someone else either, because that happens all the time in adoption. I think what's wrong is that it changes a woman's relationship during pregnancy about herself and her body. And let me begin by saying that because it's not just a job, it has life and health impacts. To begin with, of course, it changes your body shape, and accompanying that, it brings a discomfort and inconvenience because of the change of body shape and the burden it has on your health, including nausea or varicose veins or hemorrhoids. And then sometimes some women get hypertension, some women get diabetes during their pregnancy, and also they may face difficult decisions when the fetus that they carry have some health risks or comes into tension with their own interests. And it also, when they deliver, sometimes they face life-threatening complications like preeclampsia and amniotic fluid embolism, and sometimes there are preterm labors and preterm birth, which may be risky for the baby as well as herself. So I think for a job, it carries a lot of life and health impacts on the woman. And it's not just the physical dimension. I think the physical dimension also interacts with her mind and her social image. I call it a total impact on personhood because the whole body change, not only the shape, the external shape, but also the internal health. These changes have impacts on your body function. You tend to move slower, be more absent-minded, you don't sleep well. It affects your quality of life and sleeping, and also even changes sometimes your sense of smell and taste, your external image, your self-esteem, and sometimes it might have impact on your employment, your marriage, your ability to work, or your relationship with other people, and your relationship with your own children that you already have. So I think it's a total impact on personhood, not just a physical change. That's why I say it's more than a job. It has more impact than ordinary job, and compared with ordinary job, it's even harder to back out. Of course, you can terminate the pregnancy, but the cost both for you and the child or the psychological impact are I think bigger than changing other jobs. So I would remind you that I think pregnancy is more than a job. Therefore, how do we look at surrogacy? Wait, before I jump into surrogacy, let me stick with motherhood. So given so much sacrifice and so much impact, is motherhood itself an exploitation and self-alienation? Normally we don't characterize motherhood as an alienation or exploitation because I think even though given the same total impact on personhood or the health and life impact, as Andrea Whittaker's book reminds us that there are effective values in motherhood, despite of the sacrifices and the impact. It's something that the woman really wants to do herself, and also in the whole process, usually there are psychological and supports from your spouse, from other family members, and the society. I think it is these relationships that is the woman's body is fulfilling what she really wants, what she cherishes, and also all the support, both psychologically and socially, that makes motherhood, despite of its burden and its total impact, can still be self-fulfilling and still be rewarding, rather than exploitative or alienating. And because so, I think pregnancy or motherhood should always be something beyond duty. That is, supererogation means something that even is very noble, something praiseworthy, but it's not a duty. So you will be praised if you do so, but you won't be blamed if you don't do so. That's what I call supererogation. And I think because of the nature of pregnancy and motherhood, it should never be a duty. It should be a supererogation because of the total impact on personhood is too personal to be a duty compared with other jobs or other duty. And as a job, it's hard to back out. And if you really enforce any duty on the mother or on pregnancy, it downgrades the woman to incubators. And I think that per se is exploitation and alienation. And also the duty would be infeasible to enforce because when you do enforce such kind of duty, it tends to drive women away from prenatal care or any kind of assistance that would threaten both the woman's health and the fetus's health. Therefore, I like what Mary Warren, a philosopher from UC Stanford, said. She says there's only enough room for one agent in the pregnant woman's body. That is, whenever there's a conflict between the mother and the fetus, you should always respect the mother's agency to her body because there's only enough room for one agent in the pregnant woman's body. So, having said that about motherhood and pregnancy, I now like to turn to surrogacy. Can surrogacy ever be ethical? I already said that I think motherhood and pregnancy should never be duties. Therefore, if surrogacy is a contractual duty, could it be ethical? This is Professor Rudapest's book in 2015, and she described these surrogates as women that are from production to reproduction assembly lines because usually they work as temp workers and they're illiterate. And in order to try to improve family economy, they somehow become surrogates. But the contracts are in English and they don't understand anything or not much. For instance, the number of embryo that would be transferred into her body, is there any insurance to cover it if she has any damage, or amount of payment sometimes also gets confused. She ends up sometimes receiving the payment, the number that is way lower than she understood or expected. And also these women, when they are live in surrogate houses, something like a dormitory to monitor, they are isolated from their family, their neighborhood, or any friends. And after they feel that they are used up or worn out, they return to their production line as before. And then when they're well enough, they go back to become surrogates. So they seem like just a part of the whole industry, like a disposable part. And however, there are also experience from Israel or from other places. And this is, I regret for the font that are messed up because of change of computer. But this is a narrative from Israeli surrogate. And in that study by Ellie Tiemann, she described how Israeli surrogates describe her body as a body map, And she says that she could command the body to selectively interpret a sensation as personalized emotion. That is, part of her heart is belonged to herself and her children. But beneath her heart, in the belly, she can think of it as like a house or an oven for the intended parents. So she, throughout the surrogacy, she clearly tried to manage her relationship with the fetus and with her body by separating body parts, just as you try to separate places in a map. So that's how she both balances her relationship with her body and the fetus and her agency. And this is another surrogate's narrative. And she said, what do they think? That we are robots with no feelings? I'm here in order to help. I don't even call it a womb for rent. I call myself an oven that bakes the bread for hungry people. I just help them. And like if my friend needed a loan, I would save from my own food and I would give her a loan. Would they then say that I'm being used? What idiocy is? So here you see the woman feeling, fulfilling a goal that she really wants to do, and she doesn't feel being exploited and I think what's different between she and the Indian surrogate is that she's really doing something for herself, and she feels connected both to her body, to the fetus, and to the people she helped, rather than just a part that on the assembly line of reproduction globally. And I think it's that relationship that makes surrogacy so problematic. It's not having a baby for someone else or giving the baby away that makes surrogacy unethical. I think it's the disruptive relationship between that makes it a surrogate vulnerable to separating her and her body, and her and the fetus's relationship, and her and the intended parent. They're all scattered, and she's not doing it for herself. I think that's what makes surrogacy unethical. So, and also Ili Tiemann, she describes how Israeli surrogates maintains a relationship with intended parents. I think it's kind of extreme, but it's interesting to see. She said that surrogates would sleep together with the intended parent in the marital bed as if they are close friends. And also they would both stay abstinence with their sexual partner together, because the surrogate has to remain abstinent in order to avoid mixing up the fetus and the embryo of with her own husband. And so the intended mother would also do the same to show support and show that she is also a mother in this event. So actually the name is called birthing a mother. So she's not just giving birth to a fetus, she's also giving birthing a mother. That is, in this process, the intended parent also becomes a mother because of this relationship with the surrogate. So in the whole process they are together, facing it together. And she also allows the intended parents to caress her belly, and also they would show infection and hold hands together in public. So they really walk through this whole process of pregnancy together. I think that's a big contrast between the Indian surrogate who has to carry the baby in some dormitory, even away from her own family, and Israeli surrogates. She's really feeling connected and helping someone that she identifies with and fulfills her own goal. So what makes surrogacy unethical, to recap, is not getting pregnant for someone else per se, or not giving the child away per se, but I think when you detach a woman from positive relationships that are crucial for the pregnant woman to maintain her agency and to make the experience self-fulfilling. I think that's what makes surrogacy unethical. So how can we govern surrogacy and allow it to happen? Okay, so to help intended parents to have children and to protect surrogacy. I think we should put relationship back in to the regulation. And by relationship, I mean there's at least 3 relationships that should be focused on. The first one is surrogate's control over her body, and the second one is surrogate's agency in her relationship with the fetus, and the third one is the intended parents and surrogate's mutual goodwill in their relationship. I think any governing framework should try to focus on facilitating these 3 relationships to prevent surrogates, if they are going to help others to bear children, any governing structure should facilitate and try to strengthen relationships, these 3 relationships in surrogacy. So here are some points I think we can begin with. The first one is, I think money shouldn't be able to buy a woman's control over her body. I really should use the PDF format because it really looks awful. But anyway, I think money shouldn't be able to buy a woman's control of her body because as I mentioned, to have control over her body, if she has money for that, then she would lose the legitimacy to have the whole saying of what happens to her body. So I think money should be able to buy that. And also it should be able to control her personhood because it's too personal and too fundamental. And it shouldn't be able to buy agency in her relationship with the fetus because that she would lose control to her body. And particularly when the job is hard to back out, I think that would downgrade women to incubators. Therefore, of course you would say, but if the woman's willing to do so, why not? Well, maybe she has nothing to lose in terms of control to her body or her agency or the fetus, but then I still think it would alienate her from her body, harm her personhood, and harm the agency. And if you think that she has nothing to lose, then I think you're further exploiting her in her plight that is already very vulnerable. So in such case, I think global surrogacy should always be banned because global surrogacy tends to take advantage of women in lower socioeconomic status and exploit her lower self-esteem or her already lower control over her body. And so to prevent surrogacy from becoming alienating and exploitating, I think surrogacy would be ethical only when the right to her body is the same as a mother carrying her own baby, and also when she does it for altruistic motivation, although I do think that this should be interpreted more broadly than like the recent Thai regulation and Indian regulation. I know they had limited surrogates to close relative or even to very close family relationships. Anyway, I think it's even more limited. I think altruistic motivation should be interpreted more broadly, including strangers willing to help each other. And also, she only receives necessary expense. Again, I am aware that the distinction between necessary expense and commercial salary really is very ambiguous. So I agree that this should also be interpreted broadly, but still I think in order to maintain a woman's control over her body and that control shouldn't be able to sell, and I hope that intended parents can feel that they can buy the control and certainty with their money. They have to invest social and psychological support. Therefore, I think that necessary expense should still be a standard, but it can be interpreted more broadly. And finally, she should be supported by intended parents' psychological support and companionship. It not necessarily have to meet the standard of the example in Israeli surrogates and their intended parents, but I think this should at least include some caring, some friendship, and some mutual goodwill between them. So cross-border surrogacy obviously couldn't achieve all of these because to begin with different language and different locations and different culture, it's hard for them to form that relationship or friendship or mutual goodwill without this money in there. So I think that cultural cross-border surrogacy should be banned. Therefore, I think that again, we should shift our focus of regulation on relationship. I think in good relationships, it should involve communication, understanding, and support, and it requires investment and must allow some spontaneity to flourish because relationship is something that is often spontaneous. So it's very hard to regulate and govern. I'm aware of this. That's why I'm saying my title is In Search of a Governing Framework. I don't have an easy answer with it. And also it's very difficult to regulate relationship because of the right to privacy and hard to intervene. And often when a relationship goes sour, it only becomes visible when one party chooses to expose it at the expense of the relationship. So I am aware that by focusing on relationship, it does create new problems and in terms of regulation. But I think since it's the reason why surrogacy becomes unethical, we should pay more attention to facilitating that regulation. So for instance, instead of if we just regulate the rights and duties, but the surrogates don't have the ability to exercise them, it's useless. That's why I say relationship is important. And because also the relationship goes throughout the surrogacy, not just in the beginning. So just a simple approval in the beginning is not enough. There should be a mechanism, maybe an agency or some committee to see through the process, not just in the beginning. And also we should welcome professionals with expertise to help. I think this is where the UK model is not very satisfying, because I think professionals tend to have expertise to help facilitate relationship. And even though we should guard against pure capitalist agency, but it doesn't mean that any commercial party should be banned. And also I think we should refrain from criminal punishment, because I think this tends to drive things underground. I think without criminal punishment, we can at least keep things transparent and be better able to govern. So my time is almost up, and I'd like to recap. So I think the relationship should be the problem and the solution. And again, I think the problem with surrogacy is in because it detaches the woman from all the positive relationship that makes a pregnancy and motherhood not exploitative. And so any governance framework should focus on shaping and facilitating a good relationship throughout the surrogacy, not just in the beginning, but throughout the process. Therefore, you need to think in terms of more professionals, more better agencies that are being regulated or licensed to facilitate surrogacy. And I think this would, of course, require a lot of creativity and government energy. So I think the real difficulty of having an ethical surrogacy is it tests the government's will on how much do you really want to protect intended parents and surrogacy's agency. And I think that's not an easy job, because we never had these models to copy from. But I think the UK model at least has some lessons that we can learn from. So I would end here, and thank you for your attention, and welcome to any suggestions. Thank you.